Yeah, yeah.
So after undergrad,
Like, where were you?
2008.
You still in New York?
So I was still in New York. Oh yeah, I was still in New York. I was in a relationship at that time, very toxic relationship. But I thought that was the love of my life, and I was gonna live life this way. It's so crazy how when you're not in Christ and you don't follow Christ, your aspect of what a relationship is different than when you're in Christ, like when you're following God's footsteps. Like it's so different. What what you want, what the expectation you put, what are the, you know what I mean? Like the levels are way off, way off. And so I'm not gonna sit here and say, that was horrible. No, I learned a lot from that relationship. I learned what I wanted, what I didn't want. I learned what I wanted for my partner.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I was in that relationship for a very long time. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy for us. And I was in that relationship for 10 years. And then after that, I was just working. I was working a lot. And it wasn't until, I want to say, '08, that year, '08, was when I found Christ.
Oh yeah. So,
Yeah,
but what happened? Like,
'09, '08.
what
So
led to that?
My mom was going to this church, and she was going to a retreat. And they were calling me from the retreat, like, oh, you need to come and receive your mom. She's going to be coming. You're going to have a new mom. And I'm just like, and just to give you some back context, my mom suffers from bipolar depression. And so I've seen my mom in her manic, and I've seen my mom in her low. And so when they were telling me that, of course, I'm like, yeah, right. Change. You don't understand. This woman has a mental health disorder. Like, it's never going to happen. There's no such thing. And I knew of God, right? I knew that there was a God. I was just not following. And so I go to this church, and these people are like all in my face. And first of all, me and my sister went together, and we're in the car. I'm driving there, and I'm like, listen, when we get there, we sitting in the back, all right?
The back of the church.
In the back of the church. And don't talk to nobody, no make eye contact with nobody. We in and out, picking her up, and let's go, all right? And she was like, aye. And we in there like we had a plan. And so people were like, oh, who are you waiting for? Who are you coming to receive? And I'm like, my mom. Like, we were real nasty. And they were like, okay. I remember Delkis. Delkis had just had her daughter, DeJoy, at that time. And she was like, who are you coming to see? And we were like, my mom. And like, I was like, my mom. Like, everybody keeps on asking us. And I was just real nasty. I had a nasty attitude. And my mom comes in, and I'm just looking at her like, all these people are so happy. Everybody's very touchy-feely, want to hug you. And I'm just like, can you
let me breathe?
Yeah. And then we see all these women come in, and they're like dancing and like jumping, and they're so happy. And I'm just looking at them like, what is going on? And I look at my sister, and she's like, girl, I think we just entered a cult. And I'm like, I think so. Let's just wait for her in the car and send her a text that we outside. And we couldn't get out. We couldn't get out. We were there, and it was so packed in there.
Right.
So finally we leave, and my mom starts having like these prayer groups at her house with like young adults, and that's where you were at. You had your group was in her house.
Right.
And I remember you were there. You were every Friday. You were like, "Yo, why don't you stay? Yo, you should stay today. Yo, you should." I'm like, "Bro, I'm not staying here. Like, I gotta go." And I remember staying one day because me and my boyfriend at the time got into a big argument, and I ended up not going out, and I just stayed home. And I stayed and joined the group. And it wasn't then that I received Christ. I accepted Christ. It was, I want to say, maybe 2 or 3 months after that. I went to church, and there was a word waiting for me.
Right.
And that word just pierced my heart, and it revived me. It's his presence is undeniable. It's just crazy.
You remember what that word was, or?
Funny you asked. Pastor Ben was preaching. Our senior pastor was preaching.
Right.
And he was talking about There are like things heridas, like there's
Pains.
pain. There's pains that a band-aid can't cure, and only one thing can cure that. And there may be people that have hurt you, people that are closest to you that may have hurt you.
Mm.
And I had a lot of pain with my dad. Me and my dad, when I was at that age, younger, way younger, I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. I felt that I was the ugly duckling. And so my dad, and if you guys remember from before earlier, when I came back from Minnesota, my dad did not take me to live with him and my other sisters. He dropped me off at my grandmother's house, his mother's house.
Right.
And so I had all of this build up.
Yeah, I can imagine you.
I felt neglected. I felt abandoned. I felt pushed away. I felt like I wasn't good enough. So I had all of that pain. And so and one of the things that he said, you know, it may have even been your parent that have hurt you and didn't even know that they hurt you. And God knows. And I just like, my heart just stopped. Like I'm getting goosebumps and I'm about to cry. My heart stopped. And I was just like, oh my God, he knows. Like, how does he know? It's me. He's talking to me. Like that preaching, like I felt like he wrote that for me.
Right.
And he was just talking about that that feeling of being abandoned and love, and how nobody else can feel that love but God. And so
Facts. I
accepted Christ that day. And I cried the ugly cry. I mean, like the boogers were coming down. Like it was an ugly cry that day.
Right.
And ever since then, I never looked back. That was in 08. I never looked back. I think it was before 08, actually.
Right.
Because my mom went to her encounter in 07, 06, 07. So I think it was about that time. And then that's it. I mean, I've never looked back since then.
Right. So is this happily ever after? Oh.
Yeah, happily ever after. Yeah, happily ever after. I mean, after that, of course, you know, when you accept Christ, it's not like everything's perfect. And that's when things really hit. Because remember, like I told you, I was with my ex-boyfriend at the time. And so, of course, I wasn't doing things the right way when I was with him. And so accepting Christ changed a lot of things in our relationship. And I would say that was the beginning of the end of our relationship.
Right, yeah.
Because I understood what God had asked and what he was saying, and what I needed to do to make sure that I was okay. It's not like, okay, just this area, this area, this area. It's no, my all. I'm all yours. Like this is everything, my all. And so our relationship ended very shortly after that. Our relationship ended.
So what, you just called him like, yo, it's over?
No, he actually came to receive me at the encounter. He came to church, and I sat with him, and I was like, you and I can't live together. We can't be sleeping together unless we get married. It is not happening. And he's just like, you crazy, girl, stop. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. He's like, a weekend is gonna give you that. And I'm like, this is what I want. This is what I believe, and I know God has bigger and better things for me, and if you can't accept that, then it is what it is.